Emma Frost, the iconic White Queen of the Hellfire Club, starting off as a sinister foe of the X-Men to only slowly evolve into a trusted ally and eventual member of the team. However, a typical misconception of the character is that she started off both as a telepath and having her diamond form, both abilities that she's well known for. However, she didn't actually get the latter one until she joined the X-Men, or technically right before she joined, but it was the same arc. And as a fan of Emma Frost, I thought I'd make a video about it. This video idea came to me when I saw Emma on X-Men 97, and seemingly being one of the few survivors of the Genosha attack, an event in the comics that is very important to the character of Emma Frost. And I really wanted to share it. This occurred in the well-known and mixed-reacted Grant Morrison's new X-Men run from 2001 to 2004, although kept the numbering from the original X-Men comics. Well, not the original, the previous series. This series starts off with a pretty big bang. That is with the event/arc E is for Extinction, followed by F is for Failure. That last part is a joke, by the way. This storyline is what would somewhat inspired 97's 5th episode. That being the attack on Genosha from a deadly sentinel, although different sentinel technically. I say somewhat only because the event itself is pretty different, down to even the characters involved, including the villain and the sentinel that is on the island. Although in both versions, it does include Emma on Genosha. And even though they are pretty distinct when it comes down to the tone of the event, I do think that it's a very strong adaptation of E is for Extinction on 97. In fact, I would argue it's a better depiction of the event. Since in the comic, it's not necessarily focused on all that much. Instead, it's really just a few panels, and the aftermath is what is focused on, opposed to actually focusing on the event itself. Of course, though, that is my own personal opinion, which you can disagree with. You could prefer the idea that it's not really a focus on point, but instead showing the aftermath of what happened, and how the survivors have to go forward in their lives, and other mutants. Emma at this point was trying to be a better person, not necessarily a hero, but certainly no longer a villain. She's on better terms with members of the X-Men and was on Genosha among most of the Earth's population of mutants. While this event is overall pretty deadly and the majority of the characters, or just the majority of mutants on the planet are murdered, somehow Emma finds herself surviving the attack, thanks to discovering her new ability, that being able to transform into Diamond, giving her an invulnerability to most materials and energies, including the Sentinels, making her one of the few to make it out alive. This would be explained away by the Beast, as simply just being a second mutation, a concept that was starting to be played around with. That being an explanation as to why some mutants have more than one power. Jean's telepathy and telekinesis, Storm's weatherbending and flight, Nightcrawler's teleportation and increased agility. You get the idea, there's a lot more examples, but we're not going to go through every single one of them. Even Beast himself at this point was dealing with a second mutation, which made him more cat-like. Which, I'll be honest, I have some mixed feelings about. Emma afterwards would become a main member of the current team, where she would start to become a bit more fleshed out, including some questionable antics she had made. This includes a mental affair with Cyclops, where she would start to dress up like his ex for sexual encounters, in their minds. And by ex, I mean Madeline Pryor. Jean, of course, would catch on to this, and it was a pretty intense storyline. She would also get cloned, creating a fan-loved sister pack, the Cuckoo Sisters, who you might know from the Fox series The Gifted. I really miss that show, and I really like the Cuckoo Sisters. We might actually make a video on them sometime in the future. But right now we're talking about Emma, who the Cuckoo Sisters would go on to kind of view like a mother or sometimes a big sister. I find Grant Morrison's series to be pretty interesting, as it makes some really good choices, but also some really bad ones, looking at you, Zorn. But for Emma Frost, this series without a doubt redefines the character, going from a potential ally of the X-Men to becoming an actual member, as well as starting a relationship with Cyclops and getting a new power set, all of which would continue to go on with the character afterwards, and are often seen as just simply staples of the character. As to why sometimes people will assume that the character always had their diamond abilities, which, like said, we just went over, she didn't. She would even get a semi-spin-off series in 2003, which focused on the character's early years, being pretty much Emma Frost's year one. I always found the covers from this series to be a little bit off-putting with the realistic art, just a personal preference of mine, but the comic itself was actually pretty solid, and I highly recommend it if you're a fan of Emma Frost. Or a fan of the Hellfire Club, because they also have a pretty big presence in this comic. Emma since then has gone on to use his power set in different media. In fact, both of her live-action appearances in the X-Men movies had her having these diamond abilities. Who, by the way, are not the same person, but instead two separate characters who just have the same name and power set because someone forgot how the timeline worked. You see, X-Men Origins Wolverine takes place in the timeline after First Class. And by that time, Emma should be dead, and if she isn't dead, should be a pretty old adult. However, it's also been confirmed that they are not the same person, but two separate characters that are based both off Emma Frost from the comics, who also just have her power set and her name. Well, that's not confusing. Not confusing at all. She would also display this power in Wolverine the X-Men, a show that really in itself made Emma an iconic character for a new generation of X-Men fans, such as myself. I watched the show growing up, and this was my first introduction to the character and many other X-Men characters. So I do have a soft spot for this series, even if it only lasted one season, which is a crying shame because it was a really good show, for what it was. Emma had a pretty big role on the series. In fact, I would argue she was practically the main character after Wolverine. However, she would prove her loyalty to the X-Men by sacrificing her life in the series finale. Although the way it was done seemingly implied that she might return in the second season, but that never happened, so the character very much stayed dead. Or at the very least, we never saw that happen on screen. Her being brought back, that is. The character Emma Frost is an overall personal favorite of mine, and the new X-Men series by Grant Morrison is certainly a huge reason why. I do have issues with that series, but as a whole, I do think it's pretty solid. I like that when she's even a hero, you still know that she's not really a fully good person. She isn't afraid to make bad choices for the right reasons, and she also sometimes can come across a little arrogant or unlikable. She's a flawed hero, which is something that I personally really like. The fact that the character can have flaws, and they're not afraid to give them to her. However, she is actually trying to be a good person, even if sometimes she can't exactly help herself. Or at the very least, it comes across as an instinct to make certain choices that may come across not the best. I do wonder if the character in 97 will follow a similar path to her comic counterpart. I am aware the character can't be done to a T for every beat, since the sidekick affair was already changed to Madeline instead. But I do think that Emma isn't done in the series yet, and I'm actually planning to make this video just a few days before episode 7 comes out, so for those in the future might already know the answer to that. Is she in the newest episode? Maybe I should have waited until the entire series came out to make this video. But at the same time, I still really wanted to make it right now. Since with 97 coming out, I'm really in an X-Men mood and reading older X-Men comics, including those from the early 2000s. Yes, those are old to me. That comic came out before I was born. I was born in 2005, so that is considered old to me. I've been making a lot of X-Men videos, and they're doing pretty well in views, which is a huge reason as to why I like making them, but also because I just really like the X-Men and a lot of X-Men characters. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't make the videos. And like I said with the recent 97 show, I just have been in the X-Men mood, as to why I'm making so many X-Men videos and content related to X-Men. Just thought I would explain that if you are wondering as to why my channel is so X-Men centric right now. And if you weren't, I'm sorry for wasting your time. And that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!